What would you do if you were stranded alone at night, when a mysterious stranger in an expensive car pulled up and offered you a ride that would change everything? Today, I'm going to tell you the incredible true story of Lily Carter, a 26-year-old librarian who lost her job and was desperately searching for work to pay her rent. On one rainy Friday night, after the most humiliating job interview of her life, she missed the last bus home by just 2 minutes. As she stood alone at the bus stop in a dangerous neighborhood with a dead phone and no money for a taxi, a sleek black car pulled up. The window rolled down to reveal the most devastatingly handsome man she'd ever seen. Alessandro Benedetti, a 41-year-old Italian Mafia boss who looked at her with dark, intense eyes and said 2 words that would change her destiny forever. Get in. What happened next involves forbidden attraction, dangerous chemistry, protective instincts, and a love story that proves sometimes the most dangerous ride of your life is exactly the one you need to take. Lily Carter stood under the flickering fluorescent light of the bus stop, watching the taillights of the last eastbound bus disappear into the rainy night. She had missed it by exactly 2 minutes. 2 minutes that might as well have been 2 hours, because there wouldn't be another bus until 6 a.m. Perfect, she whispered to herself, pulling her thin cardigan tighter around her shoulders as the October rain continued to fall. Absolutely perfect. At 26, Lily had always prided herself on being organized, punctual, and in control of her life. She had a master's degree in library science, 5 years of experience managing collections at the Queen's Public Library, and a reputation for being the kind of employee who never caused problems or asked for special treatment. None of that had mattered 3 weeks ago, when budget cuts forced the library to eliminate her position along with 12 others. Last hired, first fired, the department head had explained with genuine sympathy, as if that made the devastation of losing her dream job any easier to bear. Tonight's job interview had been at Romano's, an Italian restaurant in a neighborhood she didn't know well, for a waitressing position that would barely cover her rent. The manager, a sleazy man in his 50s who had spent most of the interview staring at her chest instead of her resume, had made it clear that the job came with expectations that went far beyond serving pasta and taking orders. "We like our girls to be friendly," he had said with a leer that made Lily's skin crawl. "Our customers appreciate personal attention, if you know what I mean. The tips can be very generous for the right kind of service." Lily had excused herself to the bathroom and never come back, preferring unemployment to whatever degrading arrangement the manager had been suggesting. But walking out had taken longer than expected, and now she was stranded in a neighborhood she didn't know, with $17 in her wallet, a dead phone, and no way to get home to her apartment in Forest Hills. The bus stop was located on a stretch of road that seemed to exist in the gap between residential and commercial areas, too isolated to have much foot traffic, but not well lit enough to feel safe. Across the street, she could see a few businesses that were still open: a 24-hour laundromat with flickering neon signs, a bodega with bars on the windows, and what looked like a social club with men smoking outside despite the rain. Lily checked her phone again, hoping it might have miraculously regained power, but the screen remained black. She could try to find a payphone. Did those even exist anymore? Or she could start walking and hope to find a more populated area where she could call a cab. Neither option seemed particularly safe for a woman alone at 11:30 p.m. in an unfamiliar neighborhood. That's when she heard the purr of an expensive engine approaching. The car that pulled up to the bus stop was unlike anything in this working-class neighborhood. A sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Lily made in 3 years, with tinted windows and the kind of understated elegance that screamed money and power. The engine was so quiet she could barely hear it over the sound of rain hitting the bus stop's metal roof. Lily's first instinct was to step back into the shadows, making herself less visible. Late-night encounters with strangers in expensive cars rarely ended well for women in her position, and she had no interest in finding out what kind of proposition she might receive. But instead of a leering stranger or someone looking to hire services she wasn't willing to provide, the passenger window rolled down to reveal a man who made Lily's breath catch in her throat. He was probably in his early 40s, with dark hair that was perfectly styled despite the late hour, olive skin that suggested Mediterranean heritage, and bone structure that belonged on magazine covers, rather than in random cars cruising through Queens at midnight. He wore what looked like an expensive suit, charcoal gray with a subtle pattern that caught the light, and a white shirt that was unbuttoned just enough to hint at the strong chest underneath. But it was his eyes that made Lily forget to breathe. Dark brown, almost black, with an intensity that seemed to see everything while revealing nothing. They were the kind of eyes that could undress a woman without her permission, or make her feel like the most beautiful creature on earth, depending on his mood. When he looked at her, Lily felt heat spread through her body despite the cold rain. "You're going to catch pneumonia standing out there, Bella," he said, his voice carrying a slight Italian accent that made even simple words sound like seduction. "Get in." The way he said it, not a question, not quite a command, but something in between, made Lily's knees feel weak. There was an authority in his voice that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed, but also a warmth that made the invitation seem genuinely caring rather than threatening. "I don't know you," Lily said, though her voice came out breathier than she intended. The man smiled, and Lily felt her heart skip a beat. It was the kind of smile that probably got him whatever he wanted from women. Confident, slightly predatory, but somehow still charming. "Alessandro Benedetti," he said, extending his hand through the window. "And you are clearly someone who needs help getting home safely." When Lily shook his hand, the contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. His skin was warm and slightly rough, suggesting he wasn't just another soft businessman, and his grip was firm without being aggressive. He held her hand a moment longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was barely there, but made her entire body respond. "Lily Carter," she managed to say. "And I was waiting for the bus, but the last bus left 20 minutes ago, and the next one doesn't come until morning," Alessandro finished. "Which means you're stranded in a neighborhood that's not safe for someone like you after dark." "Someone like me?" Alessandro's eyes traveled slowly from her face down to her feet and back up again, not in the invasive way the restaurant manager had looked at her, but with an appreciation that made Lily feel beautiful rather than objectified. "Someone beautiful, intelligent, and clearly not from around here," he said simply. "The kind of person who attracts attention she doesn't want." As if summoned by his words, Lily became aware of voices from across the street. The men who had been smoking outside the social club were now looking in her direction, and she could hear comments being made in languages she didn't understand, followed by laughter that made her skin crawl. Alessandro's jaw tightened as he noticed the same thing. "Get in, Lily. Please." The please was what decided her. It transformed the command into a request, acknowledging that the choice was hers, while making it clear that he genuinely wanted to help her, rather than harm her. Lily hurried around to the passenger side of the car and slid into the leather seat, immediately surrounded by warmth and the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine. The interior of the car was as luxurious as the outside suggested. Soft leather, dark wood trim, and technology that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Thank you," she said, settling into the seat and trying to ignore how good Alessandro smelled. "I live in Forest Hills. I can give you directions." "I know Forest Hills," Alessandro said, pulling away from the bus stop. "What's your address?" As Lily gave him directions to her apartment building, she found herself stealing glances at his profile. Even in the dim light of the car's interior, she could see the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands looked perfectly comfortable on the steering wheel, the expensive watch that caught the light from street lamps. "What were you doing in this neighborhood so late?" Alessandro asked, his voice genuinely curious rather than suspicious. "Job interview," Lily said, then immediately felt embarrassed. "I lost my position at the library a few weeks ago and I've been looking for work. Tonight was not successful." "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Ideally, another library position, or something in education or research. Realistically, anything that pays enough to cover my rent and student loans." Alessandro was quiet for a moment, and Lily could feel him thinking. What happened at tonight's interview? Lily hesitated, not wanting to sound naive or dramatic. The manager made it clear that the job involved more than just serving food. I wasn't comfortable with the additional expectations. Alessandro's hands tightened on the steering wheel, and Lily could see his jaw clench. What was the name of this restaurant? Romano's. But really, it's fine. I just left and... It's not fine, Alessandro said, his voice carrying an edge that made Lily shiver. Men like that prey on women in desperate situations. They count on the fact that you need work badly enough to tolerate harassment. The way he said it, with personal knowledge and barely controlled anger, made Lily wonder what kind of experience Alessandro had with men who exploited vulnerable women. Have you eaten dinner? He asked, his voice returning to its earlier warmth. No, I was too nervous about the interview to eat beforehand. Then we're making a stop. Before Lily could protest, Alessandro was pulling into the parking lot of an upscale Italian restaurant that looked like it belonged in Manhattan rather than Queens. Benedetti's was elegantly lit with warm golden light spilling from large windows, and even from the car, Lily could see that it was busy despite the late hour. You don't have to, Lily started. I know I don't have to, Alessandro said, getting out of the car and coming around to her door before she could object further. I want to. When he opened her door and offered his hand to help her out, Lily felt that same electric shock she had experienced when they first shook hands. This time, though, Alessandro seemed to feel it too, because his eyes darkened and his grip on her hand became slightly possessive. This is your restaurant, Lily said as they approached the entrance. One of them, Alessandro confirmed, placing his hand on the small of her back to guide her through the door. The contact sent heat radiating through Lily's entire body. His hand was large and warm, and even through the fabric of her cardigan, she could feel the strength in his fingers. It was a protective gesture, but it also felt intimate in a way that made her acutely aware of him as a man. The interior of Benedetti's was stunning. Exposed brick walls, dim lighting that created intimate atmosphere, and the kind of authentic Italian decor that couldn't be faked. But what struck Lily most was the way every staff member reacted to Alessandro's presence. Not just with the deference of employees greeting their boss, but with genuine respect and what looked like affection. Buonasera, Mr. Benedetti, said the maître d', a distinguished man in his 60s who immediately approached them. Your usual table? Si, Marcello, and see that we're not disturbed. Marcello led them to a secluded corner table that offered privacy, while still allowing Alessandro to observe the entire restaurant. As they were seated, Lily noticed that Alessandro chose the chair that put his back to the wall and gave him clear sightlines to all entrances, the unconscious positioning of someone who had learned to always be aware of potential threats. This is beautiful, Lily said, looking around the restaurant. How long have you owned it? My family has owned this location for 15 years, Alessandro said, signaling to a waiter. But we've been in the restaurant business for much longer. The waiter approached with obvious respect, addressing Alessandro in rapid Italian before turning to Lily with a warm smile. Marco will take excellent care of you, Alessandro said. Order whatever you like. I should probably just have something light. Lily, Alessandro interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. You haven't eaten all day. You've had a stressful evening, and you're clearly exhausted. Let me take care of you. The way he said, let me take care of you, with an undertone of command, mixed with genuine concern, made Lily's stomach flutter with something that had nothing to do with hunger for food. Okay, she heard herself saying, even though accepting expensive meals from mysterious strangers went against every rule of self-preservation she had ever learned. Alessandro ordered for both of them in Italian, speaking with Marco like they were old friends rather than employer and employee. Watching him in his element, confident, commanding, but treating everyone around him with respect, Lily found herself more attracted to him than she had ever been to anyone in her life. Tell me about yourself, Alessandro said, after Marco left with their order. You have a master's degree in library science. That's impressive. Not impressive enough to keep my job, apparently, Lily said with a rueful smile. The job market is not a reflection of your worth, Alessandro said seriously, especially for someone with your education and experience. What do you do? Lily asked. Besides own restaurants, I mean. Alessandro's expression grew slightly guarded. My family has various business interests: restaurants, construction, import, and export. We've been in New York for 4 generations. That sounds like it keeps you busy. It does, but it also allows me to help people, to contribute to the community, to ensure that good people like you don't have to accept degrading jobs from men who don't understand the concept of respect. The way Alessandro looked at her when he said, "good people like you," made Lily feel like he could see into her soul. There was an intensity in his gaze that suggested he was seeing more than just an unemployed librarian who had missed her bus. Their food arrived. Ossobuco for Alessandro, and homemade pappardelle with what tasted like the most incredible ragu Lily had ever experienced. And she couldn't help but moan softly at the first bite. Alessandro's eyes darkened at the sound, and Lily felt heat rise in her cheeks as she realized what she had done. Good? He asked, his voice slightly husky. Amazing, Lily breathed, then took another bite and couldn't suppress another small sound of pleasure. Alessandro watched every bite she took with an intensity that made eating feel somehow intimate. When she accidentally got a tiny bit of sauce on her lower lip, he reached across the table with his napkin to gently wipe it away, his fingers brushing against her skin in a contact that lasted a heartbeat too long. Sorry, he said, but his voice didn't sound sorry at all. It's fine, Lily whispered, though her voice was barely audible. As they ate, Alessandro asked questions about her work at the library, her education, her family. He listened with the kind of focused attention that made Lily feel like she was the most interesting person he had ever met. When she talked about the programs she had developed for underprivileged children, his eyes lit up with genuine interest and approval. You care about helping people, he observed. It's why I became a librarian. Libraries are supposed to be safe spaces where anyone can learn, grow, find resources. I wanted to be part of that. And now you're looking for work serving drinks to men who think money entitles them to grab you. The disgust in Alessandro's voice was unmistakable, and Lily found herself feeling protected in a way she had never experienced before. Not just physically safe, but valued, respected, defended by someone who clearly had the power to make his protection meaningful. I don't have many options, Lily said honestly. My savings are almost gone, and I have student loans, rent, basic survival expenses. I can't afford to be picky about jobs. Alessandro set down his wine glass and leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. What if I told you that you have other options? What do you mean? I mean that a woman with your education, your intelligence, your dedication to helping people shouldn't be reduced to tolerating harassment just to pay rent. Lily felt her heart start to race. Alessandro, if you're offering what I think you're offering, I'm offering you a job, he said simply. A legitimate job, with good pay, full benefits, and absolute respect for your dignity. Lily stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. What kind of job? I need someone to manage the educational and community outreach programs for my family's foundation. We fund literacy programs, scholarship opportunities, after-school care for children in underserved communities. The work would use your library science background while allowing you to help people on a larger scale than you could in a single library. The offer sounded too good to be true, which immediately made Lily suspicious. Why would you offer something like that to a complete stranger? Alessandro's smile was slow and devastating. Because you're not a complete stranger anymore, Bella. Because I can recognize quality when I see it. And because... He paused, his eyes growing more intense. because from the moment I saw you standing alone at that bus stop, I knew you were someone special." The way he said "someone special," with a possessive undertone that suggested he had already decided she belonged in his life, made Lily's entire body respond with heat. "I don't understand," she whispered. Alessandro reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm that sent shivers up her arm. "You don't have to understand everything right now," he said softly. "You just have to trust me." "Trust you to do what?" "To take care of you. To make sure you never have to accept degrading treatment from anyone. To give you work that matters, resources that allow you to help people, and—" His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "The kind of protection that ensures you never have to stand alone at bus stops in dangerous neighborhoods again." Lily stared at him, trying to understand what was really being offered here. It sounded like a job, but it felt like something much more significant and potentially complicated. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked directly. Alessandro's smile was approving. "Smart question. What I'm not telling you is that my family's business interests extend beyond restaurants and foundations. We operate in areas where discretion is essential, and loyalty is not just preferred, but required." "Are you saying you're involved in illegal activities?" "I'm saying that the world is not as black and white as your library science textbook suggested. There are gray areas where good people sometimes have to make difficult choices to protect their communities and the people they care about." Lily felt a chill of both fear and excitement. "And you're offering me a job that would make me part of that world?" "I'm offering you a job that would give you meaningful work, financial security, and my protection. What that makes you part of is your choice." The waiter returned to refill their wine glasses, giving Lily a moment to think. She was being offered everything she needed: good work, excellent pay, security, and the attention of a man who was more attractive than anyone she had ever met. But she was also being asked to enter a world she didn't understand, with rules she couldn't fully comprehend. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said after the waiter left. "Anything. Why me? Really, you could hire anyone for this position. Why offer it to someone you met an hour ago at a bus stop?" Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass as he considered his answer. "Because," he said finally, "in my world, I'm surrounded by people who want things from me. Money, protection, favors, connections. But when I saw you at that bus stop, soaked and stranded and clearly struggling, you didn't see someone who could be useful to you. You just saw a stranger offering help. And that matters to you? It matters more than you know." Alessandro's voice grew softer, more personal. "My nonna, she raised me after my parents died. She taught me that a man's character is measured by how he treats people who can do nothing for him in return. You have that kind of character, Lily. It's rare." The way he said her name, with an Italian inflection that made it sound exotic and beautiful, sent warmth spreading through Lily's chest. "Your grandmother sounds wise." She was. She also taught me to recognize when someone special walks into your life, and to not let them walk back out again. The implication in his words was unmistakable, and Lily felt her pulse quicken. "Alessandro, I know this is moving fast," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand again. "I know you have every reason to be cautious about accepting offers that seem too good to be true, but I also know that sometimes the most important decisions in life have to be made on instinct rather than logic." His thumb was tracing patterns on the back of her hand that were making it difficult for Lily to think clearly. Every touch sent heat radiating up her arm and through her body, and the way he was looking at her, like she was something precious he intended to keep, was both thrilling and terrifying. "What would happen if I said yes?" she asked. "You would start work Monday morning in a beautiful office with a view of Central Park. You would have a salary that allows you to live comfortably while doing work that makes a real difference in people's lives. And you would have my protection, which means you would never again have to worry about your safety or financial security." And if I said no? Alessandro's expression grew serious. Then I would drive you home safely, give you my business card in case you ever need help, and respect your decision completely. The way he said it, without pressure or manipulation, acknowledging that the choice was genuinely hers, made Lily trust him more than all his charm and expensive meals combined. "Can I have the weekend to think about it?" she asked. "Of course." Alessandro signaled for the check. "But Lily..." "Yes?" "Whatever you decide about the job, I hope you'll let me see you again. Not as an employer, but as a man who is very interested in getting to know you better." The heat in his voice when he said, "very interested," made Lily's stomach flutter with anticipation and nervousness in equal measure. As they left the restaurant, Alessandro's hand returned to the small of her back, guiding her to his car with the same protective possessiveness she had noticed earlier. When he opened her door, he stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "Thank you for dinner," Lily said, looking up at him. "It was incredible." "It was my pleasure, Bella." Alessandro's voice was rough with something that sounded like barely controlled desire. "Everything about tonight has been... unexpected." For a moment, they stood there looking at each other, and Lily could feel the electric tension building between them. Alessandro's eyes dropped to her lips, and she found herself swaying slightly toward him, drawn by an attraction that was stronger than anything she had ever experienced. Then Alessandro stepped back, though she could see the effort it cost him. "Let me get you home safely," he said, his voice strained. The drive to Forest Hills passed in comfortable conversation about books, travel, and family, but underneath the easy talk, Lily could feel the current of attraction humming between them. Every time Alessandro looked at her, every accidental brush of his fingers when he gestured, every moment when their eyes met sent heat spiraling through her body. When they pulled up outside her apartment building, a modest brick structure that looked even more humble next to Alessandro's expensive car, Lily felt suddenly self-conscious about the difference in their circumstances. "This is me," she said, gathering her purse. "I'll walk you to your door," Alessandro said, getting out of the car. "You don't have to." "Lily." The way he said her name stopped her protest. "I'll walk you to your door." Her apartment building had an outer door that led to a small lobby with mailboxes, then an inner door that required a key. As they stood in the narrow space between the two doors, Lily fumbled with her keys, hyper-aware of Alessandro's presence behind her. "Thank you again," she said, turning to face him. "For the ride, for dinner, for everything." "Thank you for trusting me enough to get in the car," Alessandro replied, stepping closer. They were standing very close now, close enough that Lily had to tilt her head back to look up at him, close enough that she could see her own reflection in his dark eyes. The air between them was charged with possibility and desire, and something deeper that neither of them had words for yet. "Lily," Alessandro said softly, reaching up to brush a strand of hair away from her face. His touch was gentle, but the contact sent electricity shooting through her entire nervous system. When his thumb traced along her cheekbone, Lily couldn't suppress a small gasp of response. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his accent making the words sound like poetry. Lily felt herself leaning into his touch, drawn by an attraction that was overriding every logical thought in her head. She should be cautious, should maintain distance, should not be falling for a mysterious man with obvious wealth and power and secrets she didn't understand. But when Alessandro cupped her face in both hands and looked at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen, logic seemed completely irrelevant. "I should go inside," Lily whispered, though she made no move to step away from him. "Yes, you should," Alessandro agreed. But his hands remained on her face, his thumbs tracing gentle patterns on her skin. "Alessandro." "See, Bella, I've never felt anything like this before." His eyes darkened at her admission. "Neither have I." For a moment that stretched into eternity, they stood there looking at each other, balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. Lily could feel herself trembling with want and nervousness, could see her own desire reflected in Alessandro's eyes. Then Alessandro leaned down and pressed the softest, gentlest kiss to her forehead, a gesture that was somehow more intimate than anything more passionate would have been. "Buona notte, Bella," he whispered against her skin. "Sleep well." After he left, Lily stood in her small apartment, still feeling the warmth of his hands on her face, still tasting the possibility of what might happen between them. She had gone out that evening looking for a job and had ended up with an offer that could transform her entire life, from a man who had awakened something in her that she hadn't even known existed. The weekend passed in a blur of research and internal debate. Lily spent hours online learning everything she could about Alessandro Benedetti and his family's businesses. What she found was fascinating and slightly concerning. The Benedetti family had been in New York for generations, with legitimate business interests in restaurants, construction, and real estate development. But there were also hints of other activities, references to traditional Italian business practices, and connections to organizations that operated outside normal legal frameworks. But she also found evidence of extensive charitable work, scholarship programs, community development projects, support for local schools and libraries. The Benedetti Foundation had funded dozens of literacy programs and educational initiatives throughout Queens and Brooklyn, exactly the kind of work that had drawn Lily to library science in the first place. More importantly, she couldn't stop thinking about Alessandro himself, the way he had looked at her, the gentleness of his touch, the respect he had shown her when lesser men might have tried to take advantage of her vulnerable situation. Monday morning, Lily called the number on the business card Alessandro had given her and accepted the job. Her first day at the Benedetti Foundation offices was unlike anything she had expected. The building was located in Midtown Manhattan, with modern offices, state-of-the-art technology, and a staff of genuinely committed professionals who seemed to love their work. Maria Santos, the foundation's current program director, who would be training Lily before her retirement, was a warm, intelligent woman in her 60s who had been working in community outreach for 30 years. "You'll find that the Benedetti family takes their charitable work very seriously," Maria explained as she showed Lily around the offices. "They believe that with privilege comes responsibility, and they've always been committed to giving back to the communities that have supported their success." "It's impressive," Lily said, looking at the photos and documents that lined the walls, pictures of school openings, scholarship recipients, community events that had been funded by the foundation. "Alessandro specifically requested that you focus on expanding our literacy and educational programs," Maria continued. "He was very enthusiastic about your background and ideas." The mention of Alessandro made Lily's pulse quicken, though she tried to keep her expression professional. "Has he been involved in the foundation for long?" "Since he took over leadership of the family businesses 5 years ago. Before that, the charitable work was more scattered, less organized. Alessandro brought focus and significantly increased funding." Lily spent her first week learning about current programs and meeting with community leaders, teachers, and administrators who had worked with the foundation. Everyone spoke of Alessandro with genuine respect and gratitude, describing him as someone who listened to community needs and responded with practical, effective support. But she didn't see Alessandro himself until Friday afternoon. Lily was in her office reviewing proposals for new after-school programs when Maria knocked on her door. "Alessandro would like to see you in his office," Maria said with a knowing smile. "Top floor, corner suite." Lily's heart started racing as she took the elevator to the top floor, trying to convince herself that this was just a normal check-in meeting between an employer and new employee. But when she knocked on Alessandro's office door and heard his voice say, "Entra," she knew this was going to be anything but normal. Alessandro's office was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Manhattan, furniture that mixed modern elegance with Italian craftsmanship, and artwork that looked like museum pieces. But Lily barely noticed the decor, because Alessandro himself commanded all her attention. He was standing behind his desk, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean build. When he looked up and saw her, His eyes lit up with genuine pleasure and something much more intense. "Lily," he said, coming around the desk to greet her. "Come in, please." "You wanted to see me." "I wanted to know how your first week has been," Alessandro said, gesturing for her to sit on the leather sofa near the windows, rather than in the more formal chairs in front of his desk. "Are you settling in well?" "Very well, thank you. The work is exactly what I hoped it would be, and Maria has been wonderful to work with." "Good. And are you comfortable? Do you have everything you need?" Alessandro settled onto the sofa next to her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. The proximity made it difficult to concentrate on the conversation. "Yes, everything is perfect. Thank you for this opportunity, Alessandro. It means more than you know." "It means a lot to me, too," he said softly, his eyes holding hers with that same intensity she remembered from their first meeting. "Having you here, knowing that you're doing work that matters, seeing you every day." He trailed off, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air between them, charged with implication. "Alessandro," Lily said carefully, "I want to make sure we keep things professional. I'm very grateful for this job, and I don't want to do anything that might complicate our working relationship." Alessandro's smile was slow and devastating. "Lily, cara mia, I think it's a little late to worry about keeping things uncomplicated." The way he said cara mia, my dear, in Italian sent heat spiraling through her body. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering directly, Alessandro reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that was both tender and possessive. "I mean that from the moment you got into my car last Friday night, nothing about this has been just professional for me. I offered you this job because you're qualified and because the foundation needs someone with your skills, but I also offered it because I wanted you in my life, and this seemed like the most respectable way to make that happen." Lily stared at him, trying to process his confession. "You're saying you hired me because you're attracted to me?" "I'm saying I hired you because you're brilliant, dedicated, and perfect for this position. But I also can't deny that I wanted you close to me, where I could see you every day, where I could make sure you're safe and cared for." The possessiveness in his voice when he said, "where I could make sure you're safe and cared for," should have been concerning, but instead it made Lily feel cherished in a way she had never experienced. "That's a little intense for someone you barely know," she said, though her voice came out breathier than she intended. Alessandro's thumb began tracing circles on her palm, sending electricity up her arm. "Some connections don't require time to develop, Bella. Sometimes you know immediately when someone is going to be important in your life." "And you think I'm going to be important in your life?" "I think you already are." The certainty in his voice, combined with the heat in his eyes, made Lily's pulse race. She knew she should maintain professional distance, should be cautious about getting involved with her employer, should resist the attraction that was pulling her toward a man whose world she still didn't fully understand. But when Alessandro lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, all her logical objections dissolved into want. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said against her skin. "Not as your employer, but as a man who hasn't been able to stop thinking about you for a week." "Alessandro." "Please, Lily. Let me take you somewhere beautiful. Let me cook for you. Let me show you that this connection between us is worth exploring." The way he said, "let me cook for you," with an intimacy that suggested sharing a meal prepared by his own hands would be more personal than any restaurant, made Lily's stomach flutter with anticipation. "Okay," she heard herself saying. "Yes." Alessandro's smile was brilliant and possessive and full of promise. "I'll pick you up at 7. That evening, instead of taking her to a restaurant, Alessandro drove Lily to a beautiful house in Little Italy, a converted brownstone that had been restored with obvious care and considerable expense. "This is your home?" Lily asked as he led her up the front steps. See, I wanted somewhere we could talk privately, without interruption. The interior of the house was stunning, a perfect blend of old-world Italian elegance and modern comfort. But what struck Lily most was how personal it felt. This wasn't just a showcase of wealth, but a genuine home filled with family photographs, comfortable furniture, and the kind of details that spoke of someone who actually lived here. "It's beautiful," Lily said, following Alessandro into a kitchen that looked like something from a gourmet magazine. "Grazie. My nonna would be happy to know that her grandson finally has a proper kitchen to cook in." Alessandro began pulling ingredients from the refrigerator with practiced efficiency. "Make yourself comfortable. Would you like some wine?" Lily accepted a glass of red wine that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget, and watched Alessandro cook with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else. He moved through the kitchen with confident grace, seasoning and tasting and adjusting with the skill of someone who genuinely loved the process of creating something delicious. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Lily asked, perching on a stool at the kitchen island. "Nonna Benedetti. She insisted that a man who couldn't feed himself, and the people he cared about, was not really a man at all." Alessandro glanced up from the pasta he was making from scratch. "She said that cooking for someone was an act of love, and that any man who couldn't show love through care and nourishment would never truly understand how to make a woman happy." The way he said "the people he cared about" while looking directly at her made Lily's heart skip a beat. "Your grandmother sounds like she was an incredible woman." She was. She came to America with nothing but recipes and determination, and she built a life that allowed her children and grandchildren to thrive. "Everything I am, I owe to her." As Alessandro cooked, he told Lily stories about his grandmother, how she had taught him to speak Italian, how she had insisted he learn to fight but never to start fights, how she had made him promise to always protect people who couldn't protect themselves. "She sounds like she had strong opinions about how men should behave," Lily observed. She did. She used to say that real strength was about taking care of others, not dominating them. That a man's power should be used to lift people up, not tear them down. The passion in Alessandro's voice when he talked about protection and care made it clear that his grandmother's lessons had shaped not just his character, but his entire worldview. Dinner was incredible. Fresh pasta with a sauce that tasted like it had been simmering for hours, accompanied by bread that Alessandro had made himself, and wine that paired perfectly with every bite. But even more than the food, Lily was intoxicated by Alessandro's attention. He listened to everything she said with complete focus, asked thoughtful questions, and made her feel like she was the most fascinating person he had ever met. "Tell me about your family," Alessandro said as they moved to the living room after dinner, settling on a comfortable sofa in front of a fireplace that filled the room with warm light. "There's not much to tell. My parents divorced when I was 12, and I lived with my mom after that. She's a nurse in Ohio, works too much and worries about everything. My dad remarried and has a new family. We talk occasionally, but we're not close. That must have been difficult growing up." "It was lonely," Lily admitted. "I spent a lot of time in libraries, which is probably why I ended up loving them so much. They were places where I could escape, where I could learn about other worlds, where I felt safe and valued." Alessandro reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on her palm. "You don't have to be lonely anymore, Bella." The promise in his voice, combined with the heat of his touch, made Lily's breath catch. "Alessandro, I know this is moving fast," he said, shifting closer to her on the sofa. "I know you have every reason to be cautious about getting involved with someone like me, but Lily, what I feel for you, it's not something I can ignore or push aside." "Someone like you?" Alessandro's expression grew serious. "Someone whose business interests sometimes require decisions that operate outside normal social boundaries. Someone whose protection comes with complications. Someone whose world includes dangers that you shouldn't have to worry about." Lily looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the man who had rescued her from a dangerous situation, who had offered her meaningful work, who cooked for her and listened to her, and made her feel more valued than anyone ever had. "What if those complications don't scare me as much as they should?" she asked softly. Alessandro's eyes darkened with desire and something deeper. "Then I would say that you're either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both." Alessandro cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle but possessive. "Lily, if you choose this, if you choose me, there's no going back. My world doesn't allow for casual relationships or temporary arrangements. When I care about someone, I protect them completely, and I expect their loyalty in return." The intensity in his voice should have been overwhelming, but instead, it made Lily feel wanted in a way she had never experienced before. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to be mine," Alessandro said simply. "Not just for tonight, not just until something better comes along, but completely. I'm asking you to trust me with your safety, your future, your heart." The raw honesty in his confession took Lily's breath away. She could see in his eyes that this wasn't a casual proposition. He was offering her everything he had, asking for everything she was in return. "Yes," she whispered, surprised by her own certainty. Alessandro's smile was brilliant and possessive and full of promise. "See? Yes. I choose you." When Alessandro kissed her, it was with a passion that had been building between them for days, a connection that felt inevitable and right, despite all the logical reasons she should have been more cautious. His hands tangled in her hair, his mouth moved against hers with hunger and tenderness in equal measure, and Lily felt like she was finally, completely home. 6 months later, Lily stood in the office of the newly expanded Benedetti Foundation, looking at reports showing the impact of their latest literacy initiative, a program that had brought reading resources to 15 underserved schools and had already measurably improved test scores and graduation rates. The work was everything Alessandro had promised it would be: meaningful, well-funded, and genuinely effective at changing lives. But more than that, it had given Lily a sense of purpose and accomplishment that her previous job had never provided. Her relationship with Alessandro had deepened in ways that continued to surprise her. He was protective without being controlling, generous without making her feel dependent, passionate without being possessive in unhealthy ways. He had introduced her to his extended family, cousins and uncles and longtime associates who treated her with immediate acceptance and respect. She had also learned more about the complexities of his business interests, understanding that the Benedetti family operated in gray areas where legal and illegal weren't always clearly defined, but always with codes of honor that prioritized protecting community and family above personal gain. "Admiring your work?" Alessandro asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Our work," Lily corrected, leaning back against his chest. "I never could have imagined creating something like this when I was shelving books and helping people find information about tax forms." "You were always capable of this," Alessandro said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You just needed the right resources and support." Lily turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had changed everything about her life. "Any regrets about picking up a stranded librarian at a bus stop?" Alessandro's smile was slow and possessive and full of love. "Only that it took me so long to find you." That's the story of Lily Carter, the unemployed librarian who missed her bus and ended up in the car of Alessandro Benedetti, an Italian-American businessman who saw a woman in need and decided she belonged in his life. Their story proves that love can find you in the most unexpected moments, that the most dangerous rides sometimes lead to the safest harbors, and that sometimes saying yes to a mysterious stranger can be the best decision you ever make. Lily and Alessandro's love story reminds us that protection comes in many forms, that meaningful work can emerge from unlikely sources, and that the most important connections in life often begin with a simple act of trust, getting into a stranger's car and letting them drive you toward a future you never imagined possible. If this incredible story swept you off your feet and you want to hear more amazing tales of unexpected encounters, dangerous attraction, and love that conquers all obstacles, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new stories every week about real people who discovered that fate has perfect timing, and that sometimes the most life-changing moments begin with the simplest invitations. What did you think of Lily and Alessandro's story? Have you ever accepted help from a mysterious stranger? Would you have gotten into Alessandro's car that rainy night? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories resonate with your own experiences of unexpected attraction, life-changing decisions, and finding love in the most unlikely circumstances. Remember, sometimes the most important journeys begin with just 2 words. Get in. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.